Hi everybody, we are back for Bible study today. If we are looking at our map again, this event, the Transfiguration, there is a couple different ideas, but Mount Tabor is one of the locations where it is thought that the Transfiguration has occurred. So that's where we're going to be thinking about, is Mount Tabor right there. Again, not far from that Sea of Galilee. Jesus does a lot right in that area there. We had talked about Samaria before with the lepers, but there's a lot of things that happen in between them, including Peter's confession of faith. And that had happened right before this event here with the Transfiguration, that he was going to be, that he understood that basically his confession of faith to Jesus and that. So that's where we're starting anyway. And let's take a look in our book again. Okay, the Transfiguration. Hopefully that is okay and easy to see. After 6 days, Jesus took with him Peter, James, and John, the brother of James, and led them up a high mountain by themselves. Okay, now remember, Peter, John, and James, or Peter, James, and John, always the three that kind of seem to be the ones that Jesus was speaking to, teaching, and preaching to, and had a little bit more of a close group there, because they had stuff that they were going to be doing in the future that Jesus was preparing them for. There he was transfigured before them. His face shone like the sun, and his clothes became as white as the light. All right, transfigured, to be changed. You think about how he would be, shone like the sun, very, very bright. 2 men, Moses and Elijah, appeared in glorious splendor, talking with Jesus. They spoke about his departure, which he was about to bring to fulfillment at Jerusalem. Peter and his companions were very sleepy, but when they became fully awake, they saw his glory and the 2 men standing with him. Peter said to Jesus, "Lord, it is good for us to be here. If you wish, I will put up 3 shelters, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah." All right, now that paragraph has a lot in it. So first of all, we have the idea of that there's Moses and Elijah representing the Old Testament there. Okay, it's the law of, and Jesus is fulfilling the law, and the prophet being one of the greatest prophets of all time, Elijah, and he is fulfilling the prophet. So each of the things that he is fulfilling on earth that we could that we couldn't do for ourselves, he is doing, and it's like that fulfillment. The other thing that's really interesting there is that so the disciples then, they knew who these men were. They knew this to be Moses and Elijah, which I find very interesting as well, that they had that knowledge. Because it's not like they had Facebook, Instagram, or any other type of thing where there would be all these photos of these 2 men. Now, the other thing he does here is Peter, he's got a good heart. He really does. And he wants to put up 3 shelters and everybody just stay up there. It'll be just awesome, that type of thing. But that's not what God has planned. The other part about that paragraph is that Jesus, Moses, and Elijah were talking about when he was going to die on the cross and depart from this earthly place. And that's kind of interesting that is brought out in that section. All right, next part. While he was still speaking, a bright cloud enveloped them, and a voice from the cloud said, "This is my Son, whom I love. With him I am well pleased. Listen to him." When the disciples heard this, they fell down face down to the ground, terrified. But Jesus came and touched them. "Get up," he said. "Don't be afraid." When they looked up, they saw no one except Jesus. All right, so first of all, God is saying those words again. Where did we hear those words before? "This is my son whom I love. With him I am well pleased." We heard those at his baptism. When Jesus was baptized, we hear those words. And of course, this is the kind of full circle. And not a question in the world that this is the Son of God. And of course, the disciples know this, and they know that this is God, and of course, they are reverent to God. But Jesus tells them to get up, right? As they were coming down the mountain, Jesus instructed them, "Don't tell anyone what you have seen until the Son of Man has been raised from the dead." Well, there's a secret to try and keep, right? You saw Moses and Elijah. You saw Jesus in his glorified, transfigured state, and you hear the voice of God, and you're not supposed to tell anybody about it. Well, the disciples had a big secret to keep, and they did it. And he said, you can't tell anybody about this until he's raised from the dead, because things might change if that word got out. Things might not happen the way they should have happened. But God had a plan, and part of that plan was not having people talk about what was seen, specifically Peter, James, and John. Okay? Transfiguration had to happen, and it's an important piece of that. All right, so let's go to our worksheet and see what we can do today. All right, let's see. I'll put a little thing under there. All right, we'll start with the true-false section. If you haven't done it yet, you can pause your video, do that, come back, and check your work. Okay. Jesus took Peter, James, and Matthew with him to the mountain. True or false? False, right? False. Because it was Peter, James, and John. I'm just going to make the correction here. You don't need to if you don't want to, but that's kind of nice to make the correction because you'll know. Jesus was transfigured before them. Absolutely he was. He was changed right before them. Elijah and Isaiah appeared, talking with Jesus. What do you think there? False. What makes this sentence false? Elijah and Isaiah appeared, talking with Jesus. It's not Isaiah, is it? It's Moses. All right. Next one. The men were talking about Jesus' departure. Well, that's definitely true. They were talking about his departure. The disciples were very sleepy, or were sleepy. Yep, it said it in our reading. Peter offered to build 3 shelters. Yes, he did. God's voice came from a fire. False. Where did God's voice come from? A cloud, right? Cloud. The disciples were terrified of the voice. Absolutely. They knew it was God. They were terrified. And Jesus even said, "Don't be afraid," right? All right. Very good. Let's go up to our fill-in-the-blank story here and see if we can figure it out. After blank days, well, it's a number, right? So we have 2 or 6. Which one is it? 6, right? 6 days. After 6 days, Jesus took blank, blank, and John up a mountain. Who were those people? Yep, those 3 disciples. One starts with the letter P, the other starts with the letter J. Peter, James, and John. He was blank before them. Starts with a T. Yep, transfigured. two men, blank and blank, appeared with Jesus. Who were those two guys? Yep, Moses with the 10 Commandments and Elijah, a prophet. Okay, Moses and Elijah. Peter offered to build blank for the three. Yeah, shelters. Might say tents, but tents isn't one of our word there, so we'll use shelters. Shelters for the three. A voice came from a blank saying Jesus was God's blank. A voice came from a blank. From a Jesus, from a John, from a two, from a cloud, from a sun. Yep, from a cloud. A cloud. Okay. Jesus was God's blank. What was he? God's son, right. You know it. I knew you know it. Blank told the disciples not to tell what they had seen. Who said it? We have the choice of Jesus or John right now. Who said it? You're right. It's Jesus. Jesus told the disciples not to tell what they had seen. All right. So that's our lesson for today. Being up on that mountain. And what a great experience for Peter, John, and James to have, to see Jesus, to see Moses and Elijah, and a conversation that's being had by them, and then to have this wonderful event take place. Alrighty, guys. Well, I hope you had a good time reading this and going over this, and blessings on your day.